Welcome, everyone, to Paranormal Round Table. I'm your host, Josh Turner, also known as Wolf, and with me tonight is my guest who was on last Friday, Tex. He has a show called Tex's Front Porch, T-E-X, apostrophe S. Not Texas is in the state, but Texas is in his front porch that he owns personally. And he was gracious enough to let me come to his front porch and talk, and I returned the favor. He's on my show, and we're talking about Bigfoot and Dogman encounters and other things. So you know how it goes here on this show. We go down the rabbit hole. We talk all kinds of stuff. And he has a co-host that is also we're going to be talking with him too eventually and getting things done. And there's a team of him and his guys and female that they work together, and they do a lot of studying of the cryptids, paranormal / unknown, weird, whatever. And so before we go any further, I want to also remind everyone that if you want to be friends with me on Facebook, send me a message saying, hey, or Instagram, say, hey, I'm a fan of the show, or I'm a listener of the show. I don't like saying I have fans. It sounds weird to me still to this day, but you say you're a listener of the show and you like it, whatever, and you want to be friends, and I'll accept your friend request. Josh Turner 940 on Instagram, and on Facebook, just hit me up. You can look me up, Josh Turner. There's a picture of me smirking with sunglasses on. I got a Paranormal Round Table shirt. The one, just to clarify, because people keep asking, the one of me with the banana wallpaper in the background, where I'm making a weird face. I don't really use that one. That was a secondary account that I used when I was on a ban from Facebook, because I had gotten into it with a MMA guy, and we were just, I was trying to get him to fight me. Okay, let's put it that way. So I got banned. But anyways, that account, people keep messaging me about that account. I don't even really mess with that account. So if you're going to that account, go to the other one. That being said, I'm in a bunch of Facebook groups, and my wife's group is Paranormal Lounge. Of course, mine is Paranormal Round Table. It goes without saying. And we all work on it together. Paranormal Round Table Prayer Group is Nellie's and mine. Wolf Turner of PRT fan page, created by Phil Stern. That's his group, but I'm an admin. Dogman Werewolf Discussion with Della Carter and Phil Stern. I'm an admin in that one. Whisper to a Scream, which is Ryan Tremblay's group. I'm an admin in that. North American Dogman Project, Region 2, which is D.A. Roberts. I'm an admin in that. Paranormal Encounters, which is Tony Mushu, who's oftentimes my co-host. That's his group, and Quad Coalition for Sciences with Nick Valente, and he's of the North American Dogman Project too, also. And I'm an admin in that group. And then Paranormal Trucker Podcast with John King. I'm an admin in that group. So those are the groups I'm an admin in. There were a couple others, but I am no longer the admins in those groups, and that's fine because it takes up a lot of time to do any of these things. So I also want to tell everybody that we have a conference coming up. Okay, August 12th and 13th. There are still tickets available. If you guys want to get a ticket and you want to come, the 12th is booked up. It's a VIP. The 13th is still open. So if you want to come, it's going to be in Paris, Tennessee. You go to Eventbrite, and it's going to be Paranormal Roundtable presents first annual Dogman / Cryptid conference. And you can purchase your ticket, and there's going to be a whole bunch of people there. Oh, boy. Ken Gerhard, David Weatherly, Lyle Blackburn, Barton Nunley, Josh Pinocchio from What Lurks Beneath, Steve Stockton, Tony Merkel. It's just a huge event. There's going to be a bunch of people there. There's a huge bunch of people that are going to be there. Elijah Henderson, Kenny Irish, Vault from Vault of Nightmares. Bettina Moss. If I left anybody out, I apologize. I know there's Ron Murphy, bunch of people, and we're all going to be talking about Dogman. Nick Valente, Jody Cook. It's just to name most of the people. I don't even know if I left somebody out. I apologize. Steve Stockton, but anyways, that's coming up, and you can get your tickets. And hope to see you there. Okay. My personal information, if you want to email me, and send me your story, or you can send it through Messenger for friends on Facebook. Like I said, you can hit me up on Facebook. My email is joshturner@prtpodcast.com, joshturner@prtpodcast.com. Now we have a Patreon that you can also subscribe to. The information will be right there on the show. You can see it. And if you want to mail me something, it's 6001 West Palmer Lane, Suite 370, PMB 131, Austin, Texas 78727. Palmer is spelled Parmer, because I had some people say, I mailed it to Palmer, and they like Palmer. No, that's not correct. It's Parmer, 6001 West Palmer Lane, Suite 370, PMB 131, Austin, Texas 78727. So that, if you want to mail me something, you want to send me something, that's where you go to do it. And then let's see here. We got one more thing. Let's see. I want to tell you something though. Okay, if you guys, want to win merchandise, or you want to be entered into the contest to get an autographed book from someone, could be any of those authors that I mentioned earlier. There's a bunch of them. Barton Nunley, Lyle Blackburn, Nick Redfern. If you want to win one of these books, okay, and some swag, there's different ways to do it. One, you can be a $10 tier Patreon subscriber or supporter, and you will be automatically eligible to get sent a swag bag full of stuff. Or you can just join and be a $20 tier, and you don't have to do it for more than a month. I mean, that's up to you. And then you can get your swag bag. The other way you can do it is just when we drop the link, we do it every Tuesday show from the YouTube. And then on the Friday show, we drop the link on the Paranormal Round Table group. And we put the link on there, and it says on there, official link. And you go and you leave a comment on that particular link. And if you're chosen, then you win some stuff. So that's what you do. You go and just leave a comment. We do it twice a week. We have two winners a week. Tuesday, if you're only listening to us on the podcast, which you may very well be listening to me on Spotify or Podbean, whatever, you're missing out. Okay, and I'll tell you why. Because Tuesday we do a live stream that starts at 8 o'clock Central, and we go for 2 to 3 hours every Tuesday, and we talk about all kinds of stuff. So if you're not listening to that, you're missing out on a lot of content. If you're only catching us the 1 hour episodes, which is cool, you're getting a lot of content from the 1 hour episodes, but you're not maximizing your Paranormal Roundtable potential. You're not a true paratrooper. If you're not checking in on the live stream, you got to show up over there at YouTube and just check it out, because we talk about all kinds of stuff, and every week we have a different guest, and we talk about all kinds of different stuff. And so you're getting hours and hours of content. So let's get to the show here. Tex. So when we were talking, when we left off, we were talking about the area around the Red River in Oklahoma. And then we were talking about Bigfoot trying to drive people out of the areas that they in their habitats.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's pick up where we left off.
Yeah. We've gotten so many reports out there that, you were talking about, your buddy that's a travel policeman. We were out one night, and I was taking a group up to the cemetery. I had a paranormal group that I was taking up there. And Bob, our Bob Van Buren was with me, our executive producer. We pulled up to the bottom of the cemetery. Now, the cemetery sits up about, 100 plus yards up on a hill. And it's a defunct, disrespected cemetery. It's really bad shape, but it's old, really old. But anyway, we pull up to the bottom where we park. And what's cool about it, one thing that's cool about the little area right there, that's where the actual Brown Springs, bubbles up. It runs directly underneath the cemetery. So we pull up there, we park. The next thing we know, we're surrounded by 5 cop cars. So we get out, we've got tribal police and sheriff's deputies around us. We get out, talk to them, blah, blah, blah. We're not armed, that kind of thing. Well, ended up talking to these guys for about 45 minutes. The reason they were there and the reason they were looking into us is they had gotten a report of a coven of witches that were out there sacrificing chickens. And so they were just checking us out, make sure weren't up to no good. Now, during this little conversation that we had, they told me 2 of their officers had Bigfoot sightings in that area. And one of the other officers told me that he had a paranormal encounter when he was 16 up there in the cemetery. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on out there. Now, we were talking about, getting rocks thrown at people and everything. That happens all the time out there. Now, I've talked to so many people, well, if they're not big rocks, they're just messing with you. It's probably juvies, blah, blah, blah. I've gotten pretty good sized rocks thrown at me, but I don't think they were trying to run us off. Now, I will tell you this. When we were, I guess it's been about 4 years ago, we would go up to the cemetery area and we would hear what we lovingly called the 500-pound woodpecker. Now, what I thought it was, I was trying to write it off as something natural. And I thought, well, maybe it's a couple of trees rubbing together and they were barking, but we had been up there and we kept hearing it. And then we called it a day, we left, and no sooner had I got home, I get a text from one of the guys that was with us, good buddy of mine, Barry Brown, and he says, you got to check this out. I opened the video up, and it's a video of a silverback beating its chest. Sounded exactly like what we've been hearing. It's just ours was louder. Same cadence, same everything. And I'm like, holy crap. So when we talk about, them trying to give you hints and people ignoring them, they can get pretty serious if you ignore them, and I would advise, some people say if you're getting, don't whistle at them, don't do this, don't do that. I really don't think any of these people, I don't know how they can know this, that these critters are, take offense to this or take offense to that. But I would say if you're getting rocks thrown at you, you're not used to, you're not used to doing this stuff, take the hint, find you another location, because if you're walking into their living room, how would you feel if somebody set up camp in your living room? Walk in your front door, start a campfire in the living room floor, start toasting marshmallows. I'd be pretty peeved, So I think these things are territorial. They can get, and I hate to call it aggressive, because I think even if you start talking about bluff charging and everything else, I don't consider those aggressive encounters. To me, that's these critters trying to keep these encounters from going sideways. They're trying to spook you, scare you off. Take the hint and leave. Because it's like we were talking earlier. It doesn't matter what you believe these things are. Either you believe they're apes, or you believe they're a primitive human, or you believe they're supernatural. It doesn't matter. They're unpredictable, period. And they're big enough to do whatever they want. You're not going to stop them. So I would say err on the side of caution. If you're feeling unwelcome, there's probably a reason for it.
Do you, when you were out there let's go to Brown Springs. Like when you've gone out there to Brown Springs, have you personally had anything throw something at you?
Oh yeah. Several occasions. I took a buddy of mine out there one time and we were getting little pebbles zinging at us through the tree line. I mean, we would watch them sail through the trees, it was just crazy. And I've had, when we were up in the cemetery one time, we got a little bigger than a golf ball rock, thrown at us, and it bounced against a guy's heel. And then I was pulling down. I just turned into a dirt road that goes down to the campsite. And I had another couple out there with me, and they were already down at the campsite. So they were probably 200 yards away from me. And I was going like 5 miles an hour when I made the turn, and a rock probably about the size of a golf ball hit the top of my truck. And I'm like, where did this? In fact, I called them on the phone and said, what are y'all throwing rocks at me for? And they said, we're not throwing rocks at you. I said, that's the point. So I've had stuff like that happen. We were camped out there one night, and they were throwing rocks against the camper that we were in. And Gary Spike Sr., it was his camper. Me and him were sleeping in it. And he told me about a week later, he says, man, I've got chips of paint off the side of my camper when they were pinging us with rocks. So, if you're not used to doing this stuff, if you're not stupid or crazy, however you want to look at it enough, and you're not prepared for it, and especially if you've got kids with you, this is a family thing or whatever, just leave, because do you really want to take a chance? Oh, they're just playing with me. It's just Julie's messing with me, or are they trying to tell me to get out? Get out. So, I haven't had anything bad happen to me, So, don't get me wrong. I've been spooked and scared, but I haven't had anything what most people would call aggressive. Been growled at, whooped at, screamed at, stuff like that. But I think you have to make a conscious decision when you're out there doing this that, it's a very real possibility that you may not come back. You may not have done anything wrong, that you know of, but you don't know what offends these creatures and what don't,
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that when I was on your show that Jason had said you were not allowed to go out there by yourself anymore. Was there one thing in particular that sparked that, or was it just the whole?
Well, there was a lot of paranormal stuff, but and I was catching a lot of evidence and stuff, and they were concerned about that, and it's because we've got there's a picture that I've got, and for the longest time, I thought it was a big alpha male Sasquatch standing at the bottom of the cemetery back in the tree. And we went out and took comparison photos. We couldn't recreate it. We took measurements, and this thing was every bit of 12, 13 feet tall. Now, on the last episode, I did talk about, the lore of the place, the legend of the place. There was supposedly a big entity, ancient entity that oversaw or protected that place. Didn't find that out till a couple of years later after the picture. I pretty much changed my mind that that's probably what we caught, because it's just a dark shadow, big dark. Looks like Andre the Giant standing on the trees. But I think the thing that really made them sit down and have the intervention with me one night. I thought we was having a crew meeting. It turned into an intervention. And, but when we ran into those tribal policemen and everything out there that night, they also told us that, now a lot of people have probably heard of the Tiger King. It was a quote unquote tiger sanctuary ranch thing that was about 40 miles away from Brown Springs. Well, then he went to prison. They shut it down, and some guy relocated it to within 2 miles of Brown Springs. And then they shut it down again. And there were like 17 cats that were unaccounted for. And this is coming from law enforcement, okay, directly to us. One, they told us when we told them, we're not armed, They said, well, we encourage people to at least carry a handgun down here. You can't carry a long gun, but you can carry a handgun. We encourage that. I'm like, what? They have had reported tiger sightings in the area. So, and I'd had one of my first encounters that I ever had. I was going up to this. I was walking up the trail to the cemetery. It was about 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. I was by myself. At that point, there was no cell service up there. I had just started doing this. I had a pen light, a pocket knife, and a cell phone with no service with me. That's what I had. So I'm walking up the trail, and you can hear. I've got the audio on the channel, and you can hear me. I'm describing stuff that's going on, and I said, I just heard a growl, but it kind of had a little purr to it. I thought it was weird, and I believe it was on my left side, and I walk up and I hit the top of the cemetery, and I've got my little pen light, and I'm shining back around over my left shoulder, and I catch this eye shine. Now, this eye shine was every bit as big as silver dollars and about 8 to 10 inches apart. Okay, and it was about 2.5 feet off the ground or so. And I'm saying, okay, this is pretty cool, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe I'm looking at a critter here, I'm looking at Bigfoot or something. And so I'm sitting there and it starts playing peekaboo behind a tree with me. And you know how you can, if you've got a pretty dim flashlight, which I had, like I said, I was just a little pin light, wasn't even an LED, you can see there'll be something just out of that reach, and it'll be darker than, the shadow is darker than the ambient light. You know what I'm saying? And so I could see a vague shadow. And he started playing peekaboo behind a tree with me, because one eye would disappear and then the other eye would disappear, and then they would come back, and then it looked like it was almost turning its head, like the light was hurting its eyes. I don't see how, but I'm like, okay, well, this is pretty cool. And then it stood up. And when it hit about 4.5 feet off the ground, I decided it was time to go. So I turned around and walked back down. But after that, and Jason, after I told him that and we heard about the tigers, he was convinced that was a cat that I'd run into. And so with that and all the paranormal stuff that was going on, they were legitimately, and it came from a place of love. It really did. The whole crew sat me down. They said, look, Tex, we worry about you. And I'm like, why? And they said, well, you're going up to the cemetery by yourself and going out there by, camping out by yourself, stuff at night and everything. There's a million things that could go wrong. And I said, well, you're right. I said, but that's kind of my thing. It's what I do. And they said, yeah, but we don't want you to do it anymore. And I wasn't happy about it, but I understood where they were coming from. And I wasn't going to put that burden of something possibly bad happening to me and them having to deal with it, So I agreed, okay, it's fair enough. It makes a lot of sense. I'm no spring chicken. So, it's, yeah, I kid them all the time, it's like, my crew grounded me, put me in time out a little bit, but it was for my own good. I'm just, they always say, there's a fine line between bravery and stupidity. Well, I got to tell you, I've been accused of crossing it many a time. So, it's.
Well, going out there, do you think it was a cat? like a tiger?
I think it's very possible.
Wow.
I mean, it's, like I said, before I talked to law enforcement out there, the sheriff's deputies and the tribal police, I thought it was Bigfoot, that I saw. But, we didn't find out about the whole tiger possibility until a few years after that had happened. I'd be going out there by myself for years, and it's like, okay, well, I got lucky, I guess. But I think we were talking about, friendly dogs and they can turn on you or, anything like that, right? Well, you have to look at these cats the same way that's out there. They were, most of them were raised up around people. So they don't view them as a threat. They don't mind getting close to them, but they don't know how to survive in the wild either. They're still learning. That's why I think a lot of times we can hear them out there because they don't know what they're doing. They're not. They're used to walking around in a cage. They're not used to stalking stuff. And then if you want to go in the whole infrasound thing, well, tigers use infrasound. So who knows? I've been quote unquote zapped out there before. And so I don't know.
And that's interesting because and what you're talking about is the Tiger King. That's not that far from there, right?
No, not now. It's like I said, they moved it within, I think, 2 miles or less than, one of our research areas.
Yeah, and that's crazy to think about. Just because I've thought about that before. You're just walking around in the city. Because I got a report of a lion. This was and this was right outside of Brownwood, Texas. And this guy was I was driving to work one morning. He's it was 7 a.m. And it was daylight, whatever. I think it was in the spring or something. And he said that I just see this right along the side of the highway, right alongside the road. There was a lion, a male lion. He goes, it just was running alongside the road. And I thought, that's a freaking lion. He goes, I went to go grab my phone and I tried to pull over so I could get a video of it, and it just ran off into the bush. And he goes, I ended up getting a report from, Chris, I think it was 10 years ago or something. The guy said, I think it was 2012 or something. And he said, I ended up getting a report from another person who said that they were on their way to work and they saw it. Somebody, in Texas, and Oklahoma, you can have wild animals. So, it's not out of the realm of possibility that, that could happen. I had a friend he lived way out in West Texas near Big Bend, near Alpine. And he had a friend, it's a friend of mine, but he had a friend who owned, not I don't want to say a zoo, but it was like a menagerie of animals, whatever you want to call it, And
yeah, one of these roadside zoo type things.
Well, but it was private though. He would let people come and they could tour it or whatever. They could look, and he lost one of his leopards. Wow. Literally he had somebody there. He had gone on vacation to Costa Rica, and he had a person that he trusted or whatever, but this person had started drinking. And and so he started drinking. So my friend told me the whole story, and so when this guy came to town, I ended up meeting him, but it was crazy. This was several years ago when I met him. So he was telling me this wild story, about how one of the workers had gotten drunk, and everybody I meet, I always say, do you have any weird stories? Anything ever happened to you? And I've been doing that since I was a kid. I would ask people if they had any weird things. I always wanted to hear ghost stories or weird stuff. I wasn't really into cryptids or monsters or anything like that until my encounter with a Dogman when I was 15. But this,
same way.
Yeah. See, ghosts though, I was interested in that because I wanted to know what the heck was wrong with me, because I would hear and see things. And so it was this weird story. And he goes, well, I don't really have any paranormal stories, but he goes, my girlfriend saw the Marfa lights. She'd claimed to see them. But he said that, he goes, I used to run an exotic zoo, but it was my private zoo. This guy he had a lot of money. His dad was in the oil business. And so when he went to work with his dad, and then when his dad passed away, he inherited money. So him and his girlfriend, they got married. They started buying up some animals and stuff, and they lived somewhere in between Marfa and the other side of Alpine for a while. And they lived out there. This is what he told me. And he said that, it wasn't like a large zoo. It was just a personal, he had a leopard, and he had a striped hyena or something like that, and some other animal, a few different weird animals, like a pangolin or something. I think it was a pangolin is what it's called. It's a weird looking, oversized, large, looks like an anteater mixed with an armadillo. But he said that he had this leopard, and so one of the workers not workers, but somebody he paid to help take care of them, had started drinking and had some problems, was going through a divorce, and so they didn't really care, so they left one of the cages not closed properly, so the leopard got out and was gone. And so he doesn't know what happened to it. He doesn't know where it went, and he never saw it again. So somewhere out there, there's a leopard running around and so it's kind of weird to think about, and like, you gotta wrap your mind around it. And I'm sitting there at the bar going like, wow, that's crazy. Like, that's crazy to think that animal is like out there. You could just be driving, like say you're going out and like McDonald Observatory is out there. The McDonald Observatory is one of the darkest spots, and they say in North America. So you could see all the stars. I've been out there. It's really cool. It's Fort Davis. It's a really cool place. But say you're just on vacation with your family, you know what I mean? And say you got to like Bal Maria, the springs out there. Like say you're like, hey kids, let's go to Bal Maria Springs. And you go out there to go, and then you want to go to the McDonald Observatory, and a leopard jumps out at in front of your car. It's gonna scare the crap out of you. You're gonna be like, whoa, did you see that? Like that was a leopard or a jaguar. They're not gonna maybe know exactly what it was. But, because they look similar, but they're going to be like, there was a leopard. Now, the average game warden may say, now, hold on now, jaguars come through here once in blue moon through Mexico, whatever. But it's not. It was a leopard from Africa. So, you're just like, can you imagine that? Like, you're just driving down the road and you see a lion. And I've thought that before when I was doing a post. I was walking around, I was doing my rounds. And one of the places I was at, Tex, there was a couple guards who had told me they had seen a weird-looking shadow creature that looked like a cat. And then later on, I saw this thing. And it was weird. It was really weird. It was like on the ground, like flat, but then it kind of rose up. I've talked about it, I think, on one of my shows. If you go back in the archives way back, I don't even know which episode it was. But I talked about this. I think it was with my old co-host, Armando, when he was still alive. And we were talking about that, but the thought crossed my mind. Like I'm walking around this building, and I'm just like, what if this? Because this is before I saw that. I thought, what if this thing that these other guards are seeing, what if it is not a cat, like spiritual? What if it's like a panther? And I thought, and I'm over here walking my round, and my truck is way on the other side of the property. Because it encompassed like almost it was like half a city block. It was a big place. So like, what if I run into, and then the thought came just kind of zipped into my head. What if I run into a tiger? What if one of these crazy awesome people has like a tiger, in their backyard or something, and it gets loose, and you're just doing your rounds and you see it. I mean, that would be, what would you do? Like the thought crossed my mind, and I'm going like, first of all, I don't have a firearm on me. It's back there, and you're going like, that's not good, So, I mean, like you're out there. I mean, that's crazy to think about. It just kind of struck me like you're out there researching right there by where this Tiger King Zoo is right there. I mean, like,
and missing cats.
Yeah, and the animals could get loose and like say that somebody goes to sleep and they're tired, they don't, and they forget to lock a cage or something, and an animal just pushes on it and goes, oh, I'm free. And then Tex is out there looking for Bigfoot, and you run into, Tony the Tiger. He's just out there running around.
Which I very well may have.
Yeah, and that could happen, and it could happen again.
And it's out there, man. We've got everything out there now. I mean, the pig problem is out of control. You know that.
Oh my gosh! Don't even get me started.
Yeah, I mean, crazy. Vermin. I mean, it was so bad out. It was so bad out. The worst I've ever seen it was we were out there one time, and there was a fish and game guy on a bobcat out there doing work in the middle of the field. We're like, what's he doing? And we got to look at him. He was repairing acres and acres of pig damage in these fields. And I'm like, oh, good grief. How big was this group of pigs, And we've had them come up to camp, and stuff like that. And you'll hear them squealing off in the night and everything like that. But we've ran into a big cat out there for sure, because we saw it jump across the road, and then we found its track. We don't know what kind of cat it was, mountain lion or leopard, one of those, but there are mountain lions out there, or jaguars, pumas, however you want to look at And now the black bears have started coming down that far south, and one of the guys that I had Todd Neese out there with me one time, and he saw a black bear. He'd left camp. He was driving up to the store, and he saw a freaking black bear out in the field right up about 100 yards from camp. I'm like, oh, great. And we had a couple of bow hunters come through camp, and they drove down, and we were parked way back in the middle of nowhere, and they come bebopping down through there, checking their game cameras, and they're like, hey, y'all mind if we come? Now, this is a weird thing. We're like, hey, what are y'all doing? Oh, we're just checking our game cameras. We got some cameras set up around here. We're having to replace the batteries in about once a week. They keep going dead. That's a whole nother, that place is notorious for killing batteries and lights and everything else. But it was just weird that they were having to replace their game cameras, and they didn't know anything about the whole, paranormal stuff and all that kind of mess. But they had picked up a black bear on one of their game cameras. So you got literally, lions, bears, and tigers on my down there, But
they saw a black bear on their game camera.
Oh yeah,
up there in Oklahoma. Oh wow.
Yeah, right there on the Red River.
So let me get into this because I was looking through the comments of the show that we did together when I was on your show, and some goofy guy got on there, and he made a couple of really goofy comments toward my whatever, and he's like, but he said something about you, and he says your belief in what does he say? Something about the belief in dog.
My theory on Dogman was ridiculous.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. Yeah,
the theory, not the person. And I actually responded to him. I was like, well, that's kind of cool for him to say that, and I appreciate the comment, blah blah blah, type thing, because it takes a lot to get under my skin, And the way he approached it, I thought was pretty cool, because he's look. I'm not attacking y'all. I'm just, I don't agree, and I think it's, but he said, exactly what he said was, my theory on Dogman was the most ridiculous thing you ever heard.
Yeah.
And
I thought it was an insulting comment, but I mean, so let me ask, I think his handle is really odd. So, but it says something about him. I mean, but I was just going to say, what is your theory on Dogman? Because you have had an encounter, and let's get into that, because I wanted to say, hey, let's so tell me your encounter, and then let's tell my audience what your theories are on the Dogman phenomenon.
All right. Well, a lot like you, I was about the same age as you were. I was 16 when I had this, and what people have to understand is I was raised up from a young age out in the country, and 12, 13 years old, I was going to camping by myself, hunting by myself, blah, blah, blah. This is how I grew up. And I had been out hunting, and I was coming home. The sun wasn't quite down yet. And I was walking down a white gravel road that borders one side of our place. We lived on 20 acres out there. And I'm just about to, I got a couple of rabbits hanging on my belt, and I'm out of ammo. But, I mean, not that it mattered. All I had with me was a 410. So
410 is not going to do much.
Exactly. I'm going to piss it off. But so I'm just about to jump the fence and make a beeline for the house, cut across the pastures. And this thing comes out of the brush on my left-hand side of the road and runs across the road in front of me about 25 feet away. And it ran across, when it came out of the brush, it was on two legs, stayed on two legs until it dove over our 5-strand barbed wire fence, which was about 5 feet tall. And when it hit the ground on the other side, it just smoothly went down to all fours and off in the tall grass. I saw the grass move for about 10, 15 yards, and nothing. Now, this was beyond a shadow of a doubt an underwear changing moment. Okay. And this critter, when I first saw it, for years and years and years, I figured it was about 6.5 feet tall. And then a buddy of mine, we were walking around at work one night. And he had a Bigfoot encounter, and I was telling him about my Dogman encounter. And he goes, "Well, how tall was this thing?" We were walking down, and we was about to walk through the storage area. And I said, "Well, hell, it wasn't no taller than the doors right there, Mike." He stopped me, put his hand on my chest and stopped me and says, "Those are 8-foot doors." I went, "Oh crap. They are, aren't they?" And so I think this thing was probably about 7.5 feet tall. But it was, like I said, it was on 2 legs. The legs weren't turned backwards like you hear a lot. I think a lot of that is misidentification. Because it's almost physically impossible. I mean, a dog can prance around for a little bit, but they can't really maneuver gracefully the way their legs are shaped. And this thing was running like a human, but it was up on its toes and it had long feet, not a true hawk. So the legs weren't, dog legged, but it was up on its toes and it was running and jumped. And that's the only time I saw it. So, I've had people say, well, digigrade is not, it's almost impossible for them to be on 2 feet. And unless they're running or whatever. And I said, well, that's what this thing was doing. So I don't know if it, and it did go down to all 4s. So, there's that. But a lot of people, when they describe the creatures that they see, and there's all types of descriptions out there, and we'll get into that on my theory. But this one didn't have that long wolf snout or them tall ears or anything like that you hear so much about. It was more of a broad, blunt snout. Now, it was a protrusion of, the snout protruded quite a bit, but it wasn't a pointed wolf snout. A lot of people say, oh, they just had this mouthful of gnarly looking teeth. And again, I think a lot of people, when they see something like this, one is you can't get your mind wrapped around this stuff. As far as I know, as well as I do about that kind of stuff. You question your own sanity. But this thing, it was like just a dog's mouth. And the eyes were not yellow. They weren't red. They weren't nothing crazy like that. They were brown. Now, the creature itself was black with like hints of silver in its fur. It wasn't shaggy. The hair on its chest and its arms and stuff and legs were kind of thin. Actually, you could see the like grayish kind of skin underneath it. But the hair, like on its arms, hung down probably 4 inches or so. It had like what I thought at the time was, I called it a mane. And it like started at its hairline and, went down its back of its head, behind its ears, down its shoulders, and down its back in a V shape. But after I came out of the proverbial closet about this and started talking to people, and when I found out there was people out there that had seen these things and I wasn't nuts, that a lot of times they'll have what almost a grizzly-like hump in the middle of their back, and it, long hair makes it like a mane, pardon me.
You okay?
Yeah. It's still kind of, I get kind of hinky when I start talking about it in real, a lot of detail. But the face was, it had, cause it like turned its head and growled at me about halfway across the road. And that's kind of the image that's frozen in my head. I can sit down and draw it. And when it had its mouth about halfway open and when it growled at me, and it had there's an old wives' tale that if you want to find a smart dog, you find one with black in his mouth or a black tongue. And this thing had a black mottled mouth and tongue. And that was, after I, over the years thinking about it, I'm like, that's just weird, man. But the chest was like almost a barrel chest, and it went down its real narrow hips, but his thighs were freaking huge. And the arms were muscular, but they weren't like hulked out. They were just like lean and cut, almost like a professional basketball players. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I didn't see like these long razor sharp claws on it or anything like that. Every time I draw it, I don't draw it with a tail, so I don't think it had a tail. But after it jumped over or dove over the fence, now this was a split decision. This is a split second decision here, because it was like, okay, I've got two choices here. I can either follow it like I was going to, go the direction I was going ahead, or I had to take the long way home. Well, I didn't relish really the fact of following in the tall grass, So I went the long way home, which took me up to the top of our place and a road over there, and then a driveway back down the back side of our place. But when I got home, the whole walk is pretty much a blur. I do remember turning the corner up at the top of where the two roads teed together. I remember, and that's the point where I went, I don't have any ammo, and basically I've got a 3-foot club. Maybe I'll get a swing at him if he charges me, But that's really the only part of the walk that I remember, the walk home. But when I got home, I walked in the back door, and I went to the kitchen. Now, my mom, she had a rule, no guns in the kitchen. And I pretty much collapsed in a kitchen chair, and I laid my gun on the table. And she was in the kitchen. She was, I don't know, doing dishes, cooking something, I don't know. But she turned around, and I think she was fixing to jump on me about, get that gun out of the kitchen, Papa. And when she saw me, she goes, "Oh my God, you're white as a ghost. What's wrong with you?" And honest to God, I tried to tell her. I really, really did. But I couldn't talk. I literally could not speak. Looking back on it now, I was in a state of shock. That's what I think anyway. I don't see any other explanation for it. My sister lived on the same property about 50 yards away. She called my sister, "Get over here, something's wrong." She came over, they set me down, and after about almost an hour, they calmed me down enough where I could tell them what had happened. Well, they tried to tell me, I saw a big dog or a wolf or a homeless guy or a hermit or something, and my imagination took over and blah, blah, blah. They never told me, "Oh, you're crazy, you're lying," or anything like that. Well, over the years, it would come up, and I'd stuck to my guns. This is what I saw. I know what I saw. This thing was 20 to 30 feet in front of me. And they said, they finally go, "You saw something," and so that set me on my heels for about 6 months. I was one of these people that we talk about that get traumatized by these events, and they won't go out anymore. They won't do this. They won't do what they won't go back to doing what they loved, And after about 6 months of this, I hate bullies. I've just detested bullies all my life. Okay. 90% of the fights I've ever been in was taken up for somebody else. And that's kind of what I felt like was happening. This thing was bullying me into not doing what I love to do. And I just got pissed off, to be completely honest with you. I mean, and I'm not going to let this thing do this to me anymore. If it wanted to kill me, it could have. And it didn't, So I started a little bit at a time, a little bit baby steps, going back out. But I will tell you this. If I had to go to the barn, I was loaded for bear. And I went in the broad daylight. But if I was over at my sister's house and it got dark and I had to go back home or vice versa, it was at a dead run. I got to the point where I was pretty much scared of the dark. And my daddy always told me, ain't no sense of being scared of the dark. Ain't nothing there that's not there during the day, But so after about 6 months, I started going back out and doing stuff and going back a little bit further and a little bit further and a little further. Finally got back in the swing of things. And I guess it was about 8 months to possibly a year, a little less than a year later. I was going out to hunt my favorite spot. And you had to jump across. There was a deadfall that had fallen across the fence, and I would always run up the tree and jump over the fence. Now, the place I hunted, it was so thick that you had to travel the game trails. I mean, sometimes you'd be down on your hands and knees, But it was so cool because this place would open up into clearings, different sizes, from just enough to pitch tent to the footprint of a small house. And it had this like 12-inch prairie grass in these clearings and maybe a scrub tree every once in a while. It was just an awesome area, and the hunting was phenomenal. So anyway, I was just about to jump over the tree, or run up the tree and jump over the fence. And I heard something walking into the brush. And it sounded like it was on two legs. So I thought, maybe there was a set of twins that lived on the other side of this place that hunted it as well. And I thought it was one of them, or, them. And I hollered out. I said, hey, that one of y'all, if somebody's out there, whatever. And it stopped. And I said, look, David, Doug, if that's one of y'all, give me a heads up. And it just shifted its weight. And I said, look, don't mess around, man. I said, and by this time, I'm getting flashbacks of what happened, to me, the sighting and everything. I'm like, oh, man. So I said, look, if you don't say something, I'm going to shoot. And it just shifted its weight again. So I popped around off up in the air, and pretty much all hell broke loose. This thing, it's like a bull coming through the trees. I mean, branches cracking and breaking, and I got to be honest with you, I didn't wait. I tucked tail and I ran. I never looked back, and I ran the whole way home. Now, that re-traumatized me, but it did not take me as long that time to start going back out and do stuff. But shortly after that, I lost both my parents, ended up moving, blah, blah, blah. So I kind of put it in the back of my head. Didn't really talk about it, nothing like that. Well, you fast forward years and years and years later to about 5 or 6 years ago. And I'm at work and I'm kind of buzzing through YouTube and everything. And I start seeing this stuff, Dogman. What is this? And I found out that these other people were seeing what I had seen and they were talking about it. But they weren't being called crazy. So I kind of got into it, and I contacted a woman, Danielle Stedman. Her channels, I think it's still up, but she hasn't done anything in years with her. And I started talking to her, and she kind of helped me connect the dots, because after we started talking about things, she started asking me questions like, well, did anything strange happen before the encounter or after the encounter, stuff like that? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I said, about a year before, we had a dog come up missing, and the only way we found him was if we started smelling him. And he was under the house, and I had to go get him. And when I pulled him out, it looked like somebody had literally held him up by the front legs and just gutted him, just torn him apart. And she goes, I don't know why, but I've heard a lot of reports of these creatures killing the family dog or a pet or whatever, and throwing it underneath a structure. And I'm like, really? Well, then I said, we were always hearing, we would always hear stuff from the surrounding ranchers and farmers and stuff about, a mare would drop a foal and either it would go missing or it tore up, blah, blah, blah. The same thing with a calf, or chickens would come up missing. And they were always blaming on a big cat, because we'd had a big cat roam through the area every few months. Or they would blame it on a pack of wild dogs. Those two things are the only thing that ever got blamed for all this stuff. She goes, well, odds are this thing was in the area quite a while, and you probably walk by it more than you want to think about it. And I said, there was some people that owned the place next to the place I hunted, and they had a bunch of horses. They didn't live there. They just kept their horses out there. And I said, they just up and moved. They grabbed the horses and left. And I said, went roaming around out there like a dumbass kid. Went roaming around out there, and I found a horse skeleton. And it wasn't scattered. It was pretty much intact. At the time, I just thought it was cool to take the skull back to Mom, and put it in a rock garden. She said, that may have been a kill site, and that may have been the reason they left. And that's probably the reason it wasn't, the carcass wasn't scattered to the four winds, because it had its scent on it. So, that's pretty much what happened to me,
Jeez. Well, Tex, I have always been of the opinion that I don't really have a full-on theory about Dogman,
right.
And that nobody really can formulate it, and I've always thought that. And your theory is your theory, and my theory is my theory, and other person's theory is their theory. But I don't think anybody has the right to get up there and go, "Your theories are ridiculous," and then and say stuff about my understanding and belief, and they made some silly comments or whatever. But trolls are trolls, and they're going to do what they're going to do. But until they've walked a mile in your shoes or mine, they have no idea. You're very well read, very well, researched. You and Jason both. You do a very good job. Rob, I plan on talking to Rob and Jason too, and hopefully even Jessica. I'd like to get all you guys, because I think you have a really good team. I think you got something going there, guy. I'm telling you. And it's been an honor having you do what, Tex?
So I appreciate that. It means a lot.
Yeah, and so meeting you at Mineola. That was cool, and it was, and I was there to hang out with Lyle and Ken and Nick, and I ended up just meeting you and Jason and several other really cool people, like Daniel Jones was a really good guy, and just getting to meet Craig, Woolheater.
Oh yeah,
that was cool too, and so I'd like to have you back on. So folks, be looking for Tex to come on my live stream if he hasn't already by the time this airs. And I'd like to talk to you about some more things because we're going to leave some meat on the bone so he can come back. It is late in the hour, and Tex was gracious enough to stay up and record with me. I had a bunch of stuff going on today. Wasn't paranormal, but it almost felt like it because it was just one thing after another. And I was like, I am going to record with this guy if I have to freaking walk through fire and ice, and we got it done. And I appreciate you coming on and talking, and thank you for telling me, your story. And thank you for all the information you gave the listeners and everything we talked about today. And I just really enjoyed it. I had I like talking. You're a good guy. And,
I appreciate it.
we got to do it again, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it. It's like we were talking about the other night. We could sit down and chew the fat for hours. Because it's like you say, you jump down a rabbit hole and then it leads to about 6 others. So
it just goes down. It just keeps going. So that's all the time we have tonight, folks, for me and Tex and Tex's back porch. That's Texas as in TEX''S back front porch. I'm sorry. And go check out his channel. I was on there and I did a set with him and Jason. Jason's a very intelligent guy too. And thank you guys for having me on. And thank you for Tex for coming on, and for me and Tex, everybody out there, have a good night.